Welcome to the Virtuosi Music Cafe. The Connecticut Virtuosi Chamber Orchestra is preparing a very special concert on March 12th, which is a Saturday night, this coming Saturday night, next week from tonight's program. The Virtuosi will perform, among other things, a Brahms 4th Symphony, his last. And tonight in the studio I have with me Dr. Michael Schiano, our dear friend, and we invited him to talk with him, talk to us about the Brahms as a composer, to talk about his symphonies and his, in particular, the fourth one. So first of all, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you.
And well, we chatted a little bit before this program began, so let's come back in a way to the conversation. Johannes Brahms, certainly a great genius romantic, German romantic, I should say, genius as well.
Genius as well, sure.
As well. Very complicated man.
Yes, very complicated man. It's tough to come after Beethoven, right? Everybody after Beethoven feels musically that there are issues to address. It's said that you can either like Beethoven and want to be like him, or dislike him and want to be, but you can't ignore him. Somehow the Beethoven shadow goes over the entire 19th century.
Do you think Gustav Mahler wanted to be a Beethoven? Or?
Well, I think
was he
in certain ways.
In certain ways.
Well, in his symphonies, they get bigger and bigger. I mean, the Beethoven is the model for the symphonies topping previous ones. And Brahms, of course, doesn't do that.
Brahms didn't write his first symphony until relatively late in his life.
Yes. He's very self-conscious about, realizing that he's part of this very, very powerful tradition. And he's very careful about exactly what he has to contribute to that tradition. And he doesn't want to write naive music. I think the last thing that Brahms would ever want to do is to write music that's not informed by everything before him. So he was very historically interested too.
You're facing a big dilemma here, and the
Absolutely.
big dilemma is perhaps a contradiction between American culture and German culture or European culture in general, because you just said that Brahms wants to be, he's conscious of his tradition and he wants to react to the tradition. Well, the question is, how does it speak to an American audience, which is really, this society here is all about starting anew, trying new things. And tradition is, not always the most important thing in the vocabulary, wouldn't you say?
No, I agree completely.
So how do we, perhaps there's a discussion and it's a point of view, but what is tradition then? Because we are playing a concert, Brahms 4th, a masterpiece of the European music, certainly. But what is tradition? Why is Beethoven so important for Brahms?
Oh. Well, Beethoven created music that pushed forward envelopes of what music is capable of doing. And he accomplished things, let's put it that. I think that's a good word. And someone in Brahms' situation felt that Beethoven's accomplishments have to be acknowledged. They have to be built upon. They can't be ignored. And but he doesn't, as you had said before, Brahms is desperate to not be Beethoven. It's very easy to emulate someone and just sort of wallow in sort of hero worship and don't do anything further. So Brahms, of course, isn't the last person to be in that situation. Schoenberg follows right after with an even more difficult dilemma. But back to Brahms, right? He's got the Beethoven symphonies, say, as a model, and Beethoven symphonies, as you know, from the first and the second, they grow to the third, and then it's unpredictable what the fourth would have been, or the fifth, and of course the ninth is the great example of something that would be completely unpredictable or unforeseen in the eighth or the seventh. And Brahms decided that his legacy of symphonies was not going to be one that would keep growing in size as the Beethoven ones did. And after all, you know, we do have sketches for the 10th Symphony of Beethoven, but there's no choral parts, right? It's clearly going to be an instrumental symphony. Yes, and so Brahms decides, though, to use the symphony as his statement as to what he believed in and what he felt his role as a musician would be, and so. We see the second and the third symphonies as embracing the Schubert and the Schumann sorts of music. The third symphony, right, is very close to the Rhenish. It quotes it. The second symphony relates a little bit more to the Eroica, but it still has that sort of modern, in his way, 19th century feel. But the fourth is a surprise, right? The fourth seems to go back a century a bit. It refers an awful lot, in some superficial ways, in some profound ways, and in some hidden ways to Bach and to Beethoven, of course. But in certain ways, it's not that. It's not the Schubert-Schumann tradition that he's doing. He's looking for.
Maybe it is most Brahmsian then, because in the sense that, as I said before, he steps back a little bit. I mean, I've done Third Symphony quite recently, and it's quite a difficult work because one has to plan the execution of it in the emotional sense. Otherwise, you fall into a pitfall of getting in trouble. But then the fourth does not perhaps represent that much of a challenge in that sense. It's more relaxed, it's more flowing, it's more intuitive, which perhaps describes to us, indicates to us that this dilemma that Brahms lived with is maybe in some way, if not resolving, then it's relaxing its grip on his psyche. You know?
Well, it's certainly a turn in a different direction from the third and the second. It's more episodic. It seems to change moods very quickly, and especially with the finale being in groups of 8 bars. So you can have 8 bars of the finale, because the finale is a passacaglia, which is a series of variations on the same chord progression that lasts 8 bars. So the first 8 do this, the next 8 keep a similar progression but have different figurations and melodies on top. But in that you'll have you do have 8 measures that quote a Bach fugue from the Well-Tempered Clavier, right next to 8 measures that refer back to the first movement of this symphony. And so the pieces change very quickly, and I would imagine that's something that's a little easier to handle than the arching of the third symphony.
Right. Not to mention that the third symphony ends in piano, and you have to sort of build to that. But anyway, that's the third, not the fourth. Right. Now, what is very fascinating for me is from the point of audience. You know, people come and they are not conscious of, and we spoke to this issue in the previous conversations. The audience is not conscious of 8 bars, passacaglia, and all that stuff. They just want to hear beautiful music, and we as musicians, and including Brahms in that group in a sense, we must really play with the subconscious, on a subconscious level, with the people's understanding and certain sense of reaction, subconscious reaction. And interestingly enough, I've read a wonderful book by Leonard Bernstein. Actually, these are scripts of his TV programs, in which where he says that, interestingly enough, the mind works with numbers and translates that into emotional statements. But both in terms of musical pitch, you know, the melody, and the structure in terms of bars and metrum and pulse and all these things that eventually constitute a piece of music, the mind actually, on a subconscious level, even though we don't realize what we hear, we react to a triplet beat versus quadruplet beat, and versus 8 bars of phrase plus 8 bars of motif, of another phrase, a motif, or what have you. And interestingly enough, when you look from that perspective, then we need to realize that we need to translate, even with words, in this program perhaps, what we're talking, we have to translate in the language that people actually can understand. And it's perhaps important to say that it's a passacaglia, but what is perhaps more important is that the familiarity of this progression, even though the material changes, brings the the listener a little bit closer to the piece. And maybe Brahms, also consciously or not, uses that as a structural piece so that the piece is a little bit easier for the audience. Would you agree?
Yeah, the periodicity, every 8 bars, and if you're not counting bars, it's every few seconds you're back to where you were. And it's clear that you're starting again because the music is really different when you go from one of these 8-bar groups to another. Right. And to have such variety and at the same time make it a large-scale sort of structure is, I guess it's part of your job to get it to feel like a large structure, even though it keeps differentiating itself. But also the one reason to always to use the term passacaglia is because it's an old term. It's a term more from Bach, even though Beethoven uses it. When Beethoven uses it, it's anachronistic. It's not. It's even a statement when he says so. So when Brahms uses such a device in his music, it is a clear statement on his part that he's part of an older tradition than the 19th century, one that goes back even further. You must know that he arranged the famous Bach chaconne, which is another similar work to passacaglia, for violin solo. He arranged it for piano left hand and dedicated it to Clara Schumann. In fact, we have a letter in the dedication where he says that if I were the person to have written the original Bach, I would have been driven insane by that. He felt it was a very challenging way to create a sort of structure. Yes, he felt it was. And actually, I don't know, you may not be aware, there's a Bach cantata where the passacaglia form is used. I think it's 150, somewhere around there, where the bass is very much like the one in the Brahms. Although Bach one is 4 bars long, and this one is a little longer and more chromatic. But Brahms was aware of that piece. He knew the piece, and in fact, he spoke to his friend von Bülow about that, about the years before, about using that in a symphonic tradition. But he said it had to be more chromatic.
Many thoughts come to my mind at this point. One is that I tend to plug in a little bit of a social, criticism or high-minded thought, and that is we can see how his conscience is based on the past and how great he becomes because of that, and perhaps we have the same obligation to try. I hope we learn from our history once in a while.
Yeah, well, we miss things if we're not aware of it. It's like watching Bugs Bunny cartoons and not getting the real jokes.
The other thought is that along the same lines, I mean, there are works by Polish composers such as Henryk Mikołaj Górecki, who uses the same concept of repetition, so forth, to the point where that becomes absolutely the essence of the piece. I mean, it's not the case with Brahms here, which is just a structural thing, but we have a link, another cultural link here, where a composer, takes something that is, it's an old element, and refines it in a new way. Quite a fascinating progression. And for our listeners, we will be performing another piece in this concert, which is not Mikołaj Górecki, it's Mieczysław Karłowicz, and this is a symphonic poem by Mieczysław Karłowicz called Lithuanian Rhapsody. I'm not gonna, obviously, Polish music is probably my forte a little bit more than yours, but it is important to mention that it is a certain progression from the symphony to the symphonic poem, and in a way, Brahms sits on one side of that kind of wall of that line, and Strauss and Szymanowski and Karłowicz and all those folks are on the other side with this new development, which basically says, okay, well, this is symphony, but we're gonna use this structure and this sort of, a free work of art, if you wish.
Right. And it's contemporary with Brahms. It's during Brahms's lifetime that he sees this, the growth of popularity and the growth in complexity of these tone poems or symphonic poems.
This one is symphonic poem, but interestingly enough, Brahms is what we call absolute music, in other words, and then he has a huge opposition to his point of view.
Yes,
and that's
certainly
Wagner
does.
and Strauss and all those. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? That's a fascinating part of history.
It's like I said, it's a branching that takes place as he's an active composer. That many of his contemporaries are choosing that sort of music. The ramifications of writing that sort of music are huge. If you're writing music that clearly has a story, there are certain things that are permissible, or that will be by permissible I don't mean follow a rule or that are okay with rules. I mean you can do things that would seem more outlandish because they're part of a story. They don't need to be musically sound. If it refers to some activity in the life of the person that this symphonic poem is about, then that exists as legitimization for that event in the piece. And so that allows the harmonies and the procedures to develop more quickly than they would in Brahms's language, where in Brahms, ideally, everything that happens has to have a musical, only musical reasons, whereas by having things from the external world in a tone poem, or symphonic poem, they're interchangeable, really, that allows for a change in the language. And we know that after Brahms dies, the musical language has some serious changes.
Developments.
Yeah.
Also in the program, we will perform a piece by Claude Debussy. It's actually an arrangement of his piano piece called Petite Suite, which translates into small suite, really. And so that's actually the first piece in the program, the Petite Suite. Then the tone poem or symphonic poem by Karłowicz. Karłowicz, who was one of the greatest Polish romantic composers, but not in terms of timing. He is a 20th century composer, but romantic in style. He's just a complete dreamer. If you know his music, it's absolutely beautiful. And then the Fourth Symphony. Well, I hope we talk again, and we will debate more on the subject of different musical forms and ideas. For today, I thank you very much for this conversation, and I hope you'll come and enjoy our show, and I wish that all of you do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite, and I'll see you at the concert.
Thank you.
What must I do?
Submit to all our laws and brave even death.
I'll stay single.
But if you could find a wife, one who was true and faithful.
I'll stay single.
Suppose Zoroaster has chosen a pretty little maiden, one who looks just like you.
Just like me? Is she young? And pretty? What is her name?
Papagena.
Papagena. Well, I wouldn't want to be rude.
Then you may see her.
And when I meet her, would I still have to brave even death? I'll stay single.
You shall see her, but you must remain absolutely silent. Can you do this?
Of course I can.
On you too, Prince. The gods impose absolute silence. You will see Pamela, but may not speak one word to her. It is the first test of your will.
maiden disdains me. Nothing I can do will break her resolve. Her scorn will drive me mad, truly mad. Perhaps I am too ugly to be loved by anyone. Well, so be it. But I can steal one more kiss and die. Alles will mir wieder von stinkenden Herzogischen. Und die soll Liebe weil ein Sklave hässlich ist, weil ein Sklave hässlich ist. Siehst du, ich muss sie küssen. Ich bin auf dem Mädchenbrot. Ich bin auf dem Mädchenbrot. Ich werde bei dir liegen, werde man nicht für den Blut, werde man nicht für den Blut, werde man nicht für den Blut. Drum soll ich nicht bei dir stellen, küssen, zärtlich sein. Ich war Mutter und Welt, eine Dame nahm mich ein, eine Dame nahm mich ein. Sie ist schön, ich muss sie küssen. Mond verstecke nicht das so, Mond verstecke nicht das so. So lässt ihn zu sehr verdrießen, oh so macht den Augen zu, oh so macht den Augen zu, oh so macht den Augen zu.
You, be gone! Mother, where is the prince I sent to rescue you? He's undergoing trials. Zarastro! Then you are lost to me forever! Mother! Mother! Spirit me away from here. In your loving arms I will always be safe. Alas, my child, I can no longer protect you. With your father's death, my power became nothing. He gave the shield of the sun to Zarastro. With it, the power to rule is his. But what of the prince? Will he ever be mine? No. Unless we recapture the shield of the sun. This we can do by killing Zarastro. No! Do you see this dagger? No! With it, you will kill Zarastro, and the mighty shield will be mine again. No, Mother! This will prove your love for me. No, Mother, no! Silence!
for joining us tonight. I hope you join us in our performance at the concert on March 12th at 7 p.m. at the Welty Hall at the Central Connecticut State University, popularly known as CCSU. The concert is actually free. In other words, it's a free admission event. We hope you join us, and for tonight, from all of us in the studio, thank you very much and good night.